This is The Bible and Homosexuality. I'm your host, Elton Sherwin. If you know young people who have left the church, please send them a link to this series. Today's topic: when is it God-honoring for two unmarried people to have sex? The CDC reports over half of U.S. teens have sexual intercourse by age 18, and almost 90% of married Americans had premarital sex. Today's topic: when is it God-honoring for two unmarried people to have sex? We have a special guest this week, an author and researcher whose pen name is Grandma Claire. She's working on a book summarizing 70 years of research on sex and love. Grandma Claire, tell us a bit about the book you're writing.
The working title is Sex Essentials: What Parents, Pastors, and Teachers Rarely Tell Young Women. I am writing it because I was worried about how little my granddaughters knew about sex, when to do it, how to do it safely, and with whom to do it.
In today's episode, we will focus on when and how to have sex safely. In the next episode, we will focus on the with whom to have sex.
I really like the way you have framed this question, how to be sexual, in a God-honoring way that is safe and does not hurt anyone.
As I said in the introduction to this series, some episodes would be sexually explicit. This is one of those episodes. It is decidedly PG-13. Some parents who are listening to this series with their teenagers may not be pleased with how explicit this episode is. However, this is the most common question that I'm getting at church during the coffee hour. A brief recap. We started 2 episodes ago talking about how churches are failing young Christians, especially queer Christians. Then last episode, we saw how purity doctrines are hurting young Christians, straight and queer. We saw that the church's war on premarital sex has failed spectacularly, causing emotional trauma in many young people, and failed because it has resulted in the highest teen birth rate among the world's rich countries. Having said in the prior episode that the Bible does not forbid premarital sex, I feared some young people might assume that anything goes. But just because the Bible doesn't forbid it does not mean it's always a good idea. So I feel a bit obligated to take a pause from biblical interpretation to discuss what we now know about sex between two people that are not married. This episode is decidedly secular and research-driven and has definitely been the hardest to write. This topic is a bit far afield from where we started, examining the question of what the Bible says about same-sex attraction and sexual minorities. We will continue to examine the Bible's positive view of sexual minorities in a few episodes. But today, we have a special episode about a really important topic. When is sex between two unmarried people God-honoring? Does anything go? Should you do whatever you feel like after a few drinks? Is there a difference between 15-year-olds and 19-year-olds having intercourse? It turns out secular research is nuanced, but very informative and useful in answering these questions. What we will cover today. First, we will examine what researchers have discovered about premarital sex for straight teens and young adults in America. Then we will look at the data for queer youth. This research was done observing American youth, and links to all this research are in the podcast notes. All the quotes are read by the script, not the original authors. The studies that I'm about to quote do not include Gen Z, and most of this research does not look specifically at queer Americans. Nevertheless, I hope you will agree that the research I'm about to cite is broadly applicable, regardless of where you are in the rainbow. First, sex. One of the most important decisions that a young adult must make is when and with whom to have sex. The statisticians we are using define sex as first intercourse. There are problems with this definition, particularly in the LGBTQIA+ community. I will talk about that a bit later. You have probably heard it said that teenagers who avoid intercourse have better life outcomes. And, on average, this is true. Multiple studies have confirmed this. I have included links to the research at the end of the podcast notes. However, research also tells us that 3 things moderate or eliminate most of the risks for young adults and even high school students having intercourse. They sound easy, but many teens and adults have great trouble doing them. Can you guess what the 3 are? Number 1, romance rules, but casual sex flunks out. Sociologists Bill McCarthy and Eric Grodsky find that not all teen intercourse earns a flunking grade. They report,
sex between adolescents in romantic relationships is often harmless to their academic achievement. Females and males who have sex only with romantic partners are generally similar to abstainers on most of the education measures we examined.
So, romance rules, but casual sex flunks out. Multiple studies indicate that premarital sex inside a romantic relationship is less risky than hookup sex. Let me repeat that. Premarital sex inside a romantic relationship is less risky than hookup sex. And in some situations, romantic sex seems to be beneficial for teens. Paige Harden at the University of Texas in Austin has found in her research that
sexually active teens in committed, romantic relationships are less likely to engage in delinquent behavior than teens who have casual sex.
Again, we see romance rules, but casual sex flunks out. So, the first thing research tells us that minimizes bad outcomes from premarital sex is avoiding hookup sex and only having sex inside of a dating or a romantic relationship. And the second? The second action that can dramatically lower the risks of premarital and teen intercourse is ultra-reliable birth control. These are called LARCs, long-acting reversible contraception. In the U.S., they come in 3 flavors: hormonal arm implants, IUDs, intrauterine devices, and IUDs that slowly release trace amounts of hormones. LARCs last for 3 to 12 years, and surveys show that American women who use these methods of birth control, these LARCs, are more satisfied than women who use all other methods. The big aha. But there is a big aha. LARCs are a lot more reliable. According to CDC data, 1,000 sexually active women using birth control pills for 5 years would likely have over 400 surprise pregnancies, 400 accidental pregnancies. 1,000 sexually active women using an arm implant for 5 years, probably less than 4. Wow! 1,000 women using the pill will have over 400 pregnancies over 5 years versus about 4 accidental pregnancies for women using arm implants. I no longer believe it is ethical to recommend the pill to most teenagers and young adults when 3 so much more reliable methods of birth control are available. Studies in Colorado and elsewhere have shown that when teenagers have easy and free access to LARCs, unplanned pregnancies go down, abortions dramatically decline, and both high school and college graduation rates go up. Research tells us 2 of the things that can dramatically improve the outcomes of premarital sex are romance and LARCs. What is the third? Number 3, condoms. For teenagers, condom use impacts life outcomes in unexpected ways. Non-condom using sexually active teenagers are statistically more likely to drop out of high school and have lower paying careers. Non-condom using sexually active teens and young adults also have more sexually transmitted infections, are more likely to contract HIV, and are more likely to become infertile. Let me repeat that. Non-condom using sexually active teens and young adults have more sexually transmitted infections and are more likely to become infertile. Condom use for a young adult has a far greater impact on life outcomes than most people realize. Summarizing 70 years of research. Grandma Claire, will you read for us what you wrote about the research on premarital sex?
If you are going to have premarital intercourse, especially before age 19, 3 things can help protect you: condoms, reliable birth control, and romance. Many teens who have intercourse in high school do well later in life. However, on average, a teenage girl or boy who has casual intercourse, who has hookup sex, is more likely to have lower grades and problems in school. For teenagers, hookup intercourse can have negative impacts on life outcomes, even when there is no pregnancy. And the teen girls who do become moms, 60% drop out of high school and 98% will not complete college. Teen parenting is a poverty trap for girls, and the children of teen moms are more likely to grow up in poverty and struggle themselves.
98% of teenage mothers will not complete college. Wow. Researchers tell us that premarital sex has far fewer bad outcomes when it is done inside of a romantic relationship and done with LARCs and condoms. LARCs prevent almost all pregnancies, and condoms will prevent some nasty diseases and cancers. Then why not stay a virgin? Well then, you ask, shouldn't you just stay a virgin until you marry? It's nuanced. It's true the fewer lifetime partners you have, the less likely you will divorce. But those who wait beyond 20 or 22 to be sexual are also less likely ever to marry. A 2006 Guttmacher Institute study found
the vast majority of Americans have sex before marriage, including those who abstain from sex during their teenage years. The study shows that even among women who were born in the 1940s, nearly 9 in 10 had sex before marriage.
So, most of the parents who, like me, took their kids to churches and Christian summer camps teaching abstinence until marriage had themselves had premarital sex.
Yes, even among the most conservative denominations, most parents, like their parents before them, had premarital sex.
Lawrence Feiner, the author of the Guttmacher study, continues.
Premarital sex is normal behavior for the vast majority of Americans and has been for decades.
What about gay guys and gals? Research on the age of sexual initiation and its effects on queer children is hard to find. The closest I have found is a research paper titled
Adolescent Same-Sex Attraction and Academic Outcomes.
Jennifer Pearson is the lead author of the study, which found that, compared to their straight male peers,
Same-sex attracted boys show poorer academic performance. Sexual minority boys are also approximately 51% more likely than their peers to fail a course during high school.
why is this? The authors continue.
Previous research suggests adolescents who experience same-sex attraction may become distressed and withdrawn. Our findings reveal that same-sex attracted youth indeed report feeling less socially integrated in their schools. This is not surprising, given previous research on the heterosexist and homophobic climates that exist in many schools.
Note that most of this data was collected pre-2005. In some schools, things have improved, but in some schools and in some states, things have gotten worse. Also note, these are problems sexual and gender minorities have whether they are sexual or not. These are largely problems of homophobia and not the sexual behavior of queer youth. A note to parents of queer youth. This research confirms what many of us instinctively know. Affirming schools that celebrate all rainbow youth can have a huge impact on a queer person's life. When choosing a school, meet with parents of other queer children. Google the school's name and city plus LGBT. Choose schools and churches wisely. You are looking for an environment that will acknowledge, affirm, and celebrate your child, and not treat them as a defect, a deviant, or a criminal. What advice should you give regarding first sex to queer young people? The landscape is changing, and we lack large longitudinal studies. Synthesizing the research done over the last several decades, Grandma Claire has created 7 rules for sex between unmarried people. It is a good summary for straight, queer, and questioning teens and young adults. Grandma Claire, will you read it for us?
7 rules for sex between unmarried people. 1. If you can become pregnant, get a LARC. 2. When dating, go slowly. Start with your hands and wait a while before you move to oral or intercourse. 3. Only have intercourse inside of a monogamous and romantic relationship. 4. Always use condoms to protect against STIs. 5. Avoid hookup sex. And if you do have hookup sex, use only your hands. 6. Wait on oral sex until you are in a long-term, monogamous relationship and have both been tested for STIs. And 7. Try to wait until you are 19 to have intercourse.
I will include Grandma Claire's 7 rules in the notes. And if you can't remember all 7 items, remember the short list: LARCs, condoms, and romance. Grandma Claire, have we forgotten anything?
I'd like to mention one incredibly common but risky behavior: tongue-in-mouth kissing or French kissing, sometimes called deep kissing. At least 12 diseases, including at least 1 cancer, can be transmitted this way. Some of them quite nasty and some are incurable. Deep kissing may be safer than oral and anal sex, but it still carries risks. It is just safer to remove French kissing from your dating ritual.
That's easy to say, but it can be really hard to do.
Well, I have a theory about that.
And the theory is?
I call it the theory of the courageous communicators. Those young people who have the courage on a good first date to say, I like you. I want to have a second date, but I'm not into open mouth kissing. It doesn't feel safe to me. That takes courage. And then later in the relationship can say, I don't feel ready to have oral sex or intercourse. I want to start just using our hands. That takes courage. And then when it's clear the romance is a serious, monogamous relationship and that they are old enough and feel ready, can say, okay to intercourse, but only with a condom. That takes courage.
And it's difficult.
As I say to my granddaughters, if you are going to have sex safely, you have to put on your big girl panties and be a courageous communicator. There will be many things in life that are difficult to communicate, including, I like you, but I don't feel safe doing open mouth kissing. Or, I want to have intercourse, but I only feel safe doing it with a condom. It's hard. It does take courage. Take a deep breath, put on your big girl panties, and be a courageous communicator.
Thank you, Grandma Claire. 40 years ago, when I graduated from high school, I didn't know any of this. I knew 2 different ways to do calculus, but I didn't know the risks from kissing. I didn't know what oral sex was. I had no idea that people had orgasms together using hands, fingers, and vibrators, let alone how much safer it was. I really knew none of the material in your book.
Well, hopefully, we can save some young people from the mistakes we made when we were young.
Grandma Claire, will you join us next time?
I would be delighted to. Until then, remember, if you are going to have premarital intercourse, 3 things can help protect you: condoms, reliable birth control, and romance.
Sex is complicated, simpler than high school algebra, but there is a lot to learn. Among the rich countries, America uniquely has chosen a path of telling young people just to say no to all premarital sex, and the results have failed spectacularly. We have to choose another, more information-centered path. Last episode, we quoted President Carter saying,
I think Jesus would encourage any kind of love affair if it was honest and sincere and was not damaging to anyone else.
Today, we have focused on the not damaging to anyone part, particularly for young people. Next time, it turns out there are other things that affect relationship success in life, in addition to romance, birth control, and avoiding STDs. Coming up in our next episode, what should you look for in a sex partner or marriage partner? What does modern research say? What does the Bible say? There is surprising agreement. Join us next time. This is Elton Sherwin.